So yeah, my name is Amina. I am super duper happy to be here because codebar was so instrumental in my journey to becoming a software engineer. I'm actually I'm not sure if I would be a software engineer without codebar. I just don't know what my journey would have looked like without codebar. So a huge thank you to Kimberly Cook for organizing. Thank you to all of the volunteers who took part in the making of this conference and the sponsors, and just everybody who supports codebar, all of the mentors. Thank you so much. I started attending codebar, I think, in early 2019 or late 2018. And for the last 18 months, I've been a software engineer at The Guardian. I joined The Guardian as part of their digital fellowship program, which is for people seeking their first professional engineering job. The latest cohort has just been finalized, but there should be another one towards the end of this year or next year. So do keep an eye out on Guardian Engineers Twitter or my Twitter, because I'll be flagging it when it comes up. It's perfect for people who attend codebar. So yeah, this talk is all about mentorship. I was so lucky to receive a lot of support from many developers who acted as mentors for me. As I mentioned, I kind of used codebar and other methods to become a software engineer rather than like a boot camp. I didn't do a computer science degree. I'm a career changer. And I managed, with the help of so many other people, to teach myself how to code whilst working full time and with a little baby as well. I went back through all of the messages, like the emails and the texts and stuff like that, that I exchanged with people as I was learning how to code, like before I got my first job, and I counted 60, like 60 developers who helped me. And some of these people gave me one code review, some of them answered a few questions over the phone, whilst a few paired with me on a weekly basis. When I look back, I feel incredibly lucky. When I reflect further, however, I do have to admit that not one of those 60 people came to me. I never received an email saying, "Hey, Amina, I've been searching for you for ages. I'd like to help you. When are you free?" That never happened. I had to initiate all of those relationships. I had to reach out. I had to ask for help. So I think you can create your own luck on your coding journey, and I want to show you how. So first things first, what is mentoring? Super difficult to define. I see mentorship as a learning relationship, usually between someone with experience in the area the mentee wants to grow into. But there are so many different types of mentoring, and I believe you can create whatever works best for you. Personally, I've used mentors for two things, technical help and career advice. And I actually continue to have mentors in both those two areas until today. So I've had mentors that I've paired with who have given me code reviews or just answered my technical questions. I've also had mentors who have looked over my CV and cover letter, who have coached me on how to get a job, and importantly, very importantly, just motivated me when I felt down, because looking for that first job is tough. It is so tough. One of the things that codebar gives is just a community of peers, of people who are all in the same struggle. So that kind of motivation is super necessary as well. Incidentally, the title of this talk, How to Find Your Perfect Mentor, is a misnomer. It's so unlikely that you're going to find one mentor who will meet all of your needs. As I said, I interacted with around 60 people. So I actually encourage seeking support and advice from many people. I'm often so surprised by how advice can differ so much from person to person. I think our human experiences are just so diverse. And I found that speaking to several people, you know, on a given question or topic makes for a much richer experience. So let me go in the right direction through my slides. So seeking mentorship generally means that we have some sort of goal. This is likely to define the kind of mentorship most suitable to us. I think getting specific about our goals is really helpful. For example, instead of saying, you know, I want to learn how to code, we could be more detailed by saying, I want to learn so-and-so language and framework to build this project or to complete, you know, this kind of technical test. Or, you know, we could say, you know, I want to get a job, but rather it might be better to say, I want to get, you know, this kind of job, a kind of front end, back end job with this kind of company, you know, that offers flexible working and, you know, and then you can ask much more helpful questions like what would make me a more competitive candidate for such a role. So I think getting specific can help us consider where best to find ideal mentors, and also helps us craft a really clear call to action for people that we seek support from. I want to share a mistake that I made around goal setting. So when I was teaching myself how to code, or at least when I thought I was, I approached people for help and I got responses like, well, have you built this sort of application? Or let's build this kind of application together. And it was only a few months after doing this that I realized my goal was to get a job as a software engineer, not necessarily just to code. And those two things are completely different. They require a completely different set of actions. So when I started learning about the job application process, I was surprised to realize that the learning that I had been doing hadn't prepared me to pass a technical test. And this is often needed before one can even speak to an engineer at a company. Once I realized this, I completely pivoted my learning plan and focused solely on technical tests. So upon reflection, I would have saved so much time if I had done the following two things. So first, I wish I had spent more time introspecting, asking myself, what do I really want to achieve? What would make me happy? What is most important to me? I think this would have led me to the answer that I want to be employed as an engineer. The second thing I would have done differently is I would have spent more time researching what getting a job involves. There are so many blog posts about this online. It wouldn't have taken me long to realize that I need a certain skill set to get a job. I also would have spoken to at least 5 to 10 people who are self-taught in London, which is my home, to get as much relevant information as I could. So doing these two things, introspecting and researching, wouldn't have taken long, but would have saved me a few months. So what I've learned is that the answers that we get from our mentors are only as good as the questions we ask. So asking the right questions can save us time, can save us money, and a lot of energy and motivation. Examining our goal may help us to seek the most appropriate mentorship advice for us. So let's say we've got our potential goal. How do we initiate contact with a potential mentor? So I want to run through some of the different online and in-person platforms that we can consider. I'll note why each platform is particularly good and how I think we can use it. I'll start with the online ones. So the first one, and also my favorite, is open source. I know one of my old mentors, Eddie, will speak on this topic later this afternoon. Eddie is such a wonderful person. I'm so excited that he could speak at Codebar Festival. So if you have a technical goal that you're seeking help on, contributing to open source could be a great channel to find mentorship. You might be able to work on a code base that has actual users in a team of developers following a normal development process. And this is likely to give us a more realistic experience of what a typical developer would do day to day, rather than completing a typical side project alone. So the best open source communities will give you code reviews. They may have chat rooms where you can seek further help and find someone to pair with. It can take time to find the right community for you, but I really recommend GitHub's advanced search feature, where you can search repos by language and even get really specific and search by the number of closed PRs to see how active they are. Once you find a few repos that you like, and by repo I mean repository, which is essentially just a project, a project on GitHub, you can reach out to the most active contributors and see if they're willing to help. I would say, bear in mind that being an active contributor to an open source project can be very time consuming. So that person might not be available to support, but they might know someone who is. So I did just this when I was struggling to install a new open source project, and I ended up pairing with a senior engineer on a weekly basis on that repo, and that was one of the game changers for me in upping my kind of coding skills. I hypothesize that a lot of open source contributors will be doing open source work in their free time. Therefore, this could make for a really compelling set of potential mentors who are already using their personal time to code. It might not be such a huge change for them to share their screen and pair with someone instead of just coding alone, which is why I think it's a great way to find mentorship. The second channel is Slack, or something like Gitter. We've got a number of meetups, like Codebar, of course, that are established to help people learn how to code. I currently write Scala. We have the amazing Scala Bridge, which is a meetup for people to learn Scala, for people from underrepresented groups in tech, so similar to Codebar, but language focused. There's Coding Black Females. There are so many, and they all have amazingly active Slack groups. They're great places to receive code reviews or get answers to your technical questions. They're really good for targeted technical questions. After asking a few questions on such kind of chat rooms, you might see a pattern in who's responding to your questions. You could reach out to that person directly and ask more questions. I used to do this, and I actually received remote pairing from this, which was really useful. So I want to also mention LinkedIn. LinkedIn is generally seen as unfashionable, I feel, amongst software engineers, but there are some developers who use it. Definitely myself, when I was looking for my first job, I used it. I think if you're kind of targeting engineers who work at larger enterprises, they also may be likely to use it. I think LinkedIn is really useful when you have no prior experience kind of in the engineering industry and a limited network, as I had, because using their advanced search feature, you can find people whose profiles really stick out to you, who you find really inspiring. I would kind of reach out to people and, in those 140 characters that you've got to connect with someone, I'd have a sentence around my own story, which might be compelling. You might be able to say something like, I'm a musician teaching myself Ruby, or I just built my own website, in my spare time. And then I would always have a really clear call to action, an easy one, something like, would you have 10 minutes to speak on the phone about your experience at this company or on this boot camp? I would also give an alternative like, or could you answer my questions over email? I think a clear call to action on LinkedIn works really well. It helps the reader understand what you're asking for and why they should connect with you. The next one is Twitter. I think Twitter is absolutely fantastic for getting to know the engineering industry, because you can research popular influencers and hashtags and gain an understanding of the current issues that engineers are talking about in the industry. We have some super inspiring developers who use their popularity on Twitter to help others. So you can often reply to tweets where they're kind of trying to share new job opportunities. I've used Twitter really successfully to get conference buddies, or sometimes help submitting a tech talk to a certain conference. I think for specific calls to action where you can tag a person or an organization who will retweet to a wider audience, this can be really, really helpful. So we've spoken about online platforms, but what about in-person opportunities? I think meetups, of course, like codebar, are just absolutely wonderful. They're no-brainers. I would often kind of ask volunteers if they wouldn't mind answering my questions or helping me get unstuck on a personal project outside of kind of codebar times as well. And obviously I don't push that on any kind of mentor, because they already give up so much of their times. But I often found that mentors are so passionate and really, really willing to help in any way they can. Conferences can be absolute game changers. Of course, when they were in person, they were just wonderful ways of networking and meeting people. So hopefully when things get a little bit back to normal, I think conferences are just wonderful ways of expanding your network and finding people who might be able to help. So in summary, we've spoken about online and in-person platforms, tips on initiating relationships and conversations with people who might be able to support you on your journey. I want to note that when I reflect on my most active mentoring relationships, they all came from different platforms. So it might be worth having a diversified strategy where you don't just focus on one, but have a look at several. I also noticed that these mentoring relationships were created over a period of time, so I don't think they happen overnight. For me, I got my most active mentors over a period of 6 months or so. So there are a few platform agnostic things we can consider when seeking mentors. First, I think it's important to respect people's boundaries. It's also vital to stay safe online, especially when reaching out to people that we don't know. In terms of communication, it's really helpful to be concise. So creating a compelling story and understanding your why is really advantageous. So to kind of come up with this, you could ask yourself questions like, why am I learning how to code? Why am I seeking a job as a software engineer? Most of us have considerable demands on our time, so being able to express our why might make our message more attractive to a potential mentor. Most importantly, we need to do our research. So it's better to read someone's blog articles before asking a question that they've already answered elsewhere. Have a clear call to action, like we mentioned in the previous slide. I would also advise implementing a testing phase. So after asking for a defined action, you can assess, did this person give me explanations that made sense to me? Do I feel like I can communicate easily with this person? Did they keep to our agreed meeting time? I think by having a small call to action, you can then test if this is someone that you want to continue seeking support from. I also always like to ask for referrals. So if the person you've reached out to can't help, you could ask, is there someone else they could put you in touch with? And you'd be really surprised, but I feel that most of the time, people will often come back to me and say, yeah, here's a couple people who I think you can speak to. I think it's really important to contact a number of people instead of just relying on one person. I guarantee you there are so many people out there willing to help. If you get a no from one person, just learn from the experience and try and kind of iterate upon it, but don't let that demotivate you from reaching out to others. So we've spoken about initiating relationships. How do you nurture great ones? So first, I want to bring up Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication work around communicating needs. I think it would be wrong to assume that the mentoring relationship is only about the mentee's needs. It's very much about the mentor's needs too. And this follows my premise that mentoring is hugely beneficial for mentors as well as mentees. So how can we find out what these needs might be? How can this help us create a more symbiotic relationship? So to understand the needs of our mentors, we could ask things like, oh, I'm really inspired by how you give your time to help others. What do you think motivates you to do this? So when I've asked this question, I've received varying responses, all of which gave me some insight into my mentor's motivations and some clues as to how I could meet their needs. So, for example, one of my mentors said that he actually considered teaching as a career, but decided to become an engineer instead. So he loves the process of helping someone learn a new concept. So this is super useful information for me because it means that mastering complex technical concepts is likely to be something that he would enjoy helping with. What are some of the other things that have proved successful for me? And importantly, how can you learn from some of the mistakes that I've made? So first, I rarely expressly ask someone to be my mentor. Instead, I have often found that this relationship emerges organically by both parties committing to meet or speak regularly. So when I have a call or meet up with a mentor, I'm usually prepared with an agenda. So I'll keep a doc, and I'll note kind of the dates of when we meet up, and I'll have an agenda, and I'll also keep a note of what we actually discussed. For pairing, I often describe the task, or if there's a GitHub repo we're working on, I'll send the issue that I want to cover in advance. And I'll ask for kind of concepts or readings that I can go over before our pairing session to make best use of the time. And likewise, after pairing, I'll ask for feedback on what the person thinks I can spend more time learning about or practicing. On mistakes, I've made a few mistakes. So I have overcommitted to actions that are unrealistic for me to complete in the allotted time frame. Sometimes I have too many mentors and can't complete all of the actions. What I've learned sometimes is to say to someone I'm pairing with regularly, okay, I don't really have time to make progress outside of our pairing sessions. Is that okay for me to just come to pairing and we kind of pair together and do it that way, which kind of lightens the load on me. Another painful mistake I've made is kind of doing side projects, seeking advice, and not explicitly requesting the easiest technical solution to my problem. I think sometimes seasoned developers forget what it's like to be a beginner, and sometimes you can receive advice that is kind of that is a solution that they're most excited about, or that's a fashionable solution. So I prefer to ask for the easiest option so that I don't feel demotivated by how hard it is to implement something more difficult. Also, I think it's worth noting that you can feel empowered to end a mentoring relationship if it's no longer working for you or you've achieved your goal. I made this mistake where I wasn't as clear as I could have been, that actually, I can graduate an active mentor into a more passive one. So instead of meeting regularly, just asking questions over email as they come up. So overall, I really and truly believe that there are many, many people out there waiting to support you on your engineering journey. In this talk, we've discussed assessing your goals, getting specific to define the kind of mentoring that you're looking for. There are so many different platforms that we can consider to reach out to potential mentors. There are some generic tips when reaching out to people, doing our research, using storytelling to create rapport, creating a really clear call to action, and using a testing phase. We looked at nurturing these relationships by considering our mentors' needs, making the best use of their time, and actioning meetings appropriately afterwards. Sometimes learning how to code or trying to become a software engineer can feel really challenging. Trust me, I've been there. I've been willing to give up, before I got my first job. I've received, rejection after rejection after rejection. I know how tough it is, but I want you to know that there are so many people out there willing to help you. I think that you can create your own luck, and you can start initiating new mentoring relationships today. Thank you very much. Stop sharing.
Hello.
Hi.
Much. You are an incredible speaker. I've watched your talks on video before, but it's completely different when you're actually sat watching someone. And yeah, you were an incredible speaker.
Oh, that's so sweet of you. Goodness me, thank you so much. I haven't been able, unfortunately, to see the chat as I was speaking, so I'm just looking through.
Yeah, there's lots of positive comments. There's lots of positive comments. Just trying to see, I know we did have one or two questions. Sleep deprivation came up, which is quite fun. So I've got a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. Does sleep deprivation make a noticeable difference to you?
It's really funny you should ask that, because I really struggle with sleep deprivation. My son is 3.5 now, but when I started learning how to code, he was under 1. I just feel for you, and you can only do the best you can. One thing Eddie taught me, he's going to speak later this afternoon, is he taught me that I should have a regular kind of pattern of coding. So he would always say, look, if it's just 15 minutes a day, he was very much into kind of make one commit, to a repo that you're working on every day. So I would wake up at 5 a.m. Everyone has their own style. I do an hour, and that was it,
Yeah.
And after a few months, you'd be surprised. So sleep deprivation is real. With 2 kids, I can only imagine. And you just have to be kind to yourself.
Yeah, I think, be kind to yourself is a nice way to end, I think.